People who have good recovery are going to pick up the phone if they can because they are walking the walk. Generally, that's the case. That's the best. There are things that maybe not so great that you see in a 12-step group. The best part of the 12 steps are the people who extend the hand and help others, even when it's not in their interest and it's painful to them. Painful being, I don't want to talk to somebody at 1 or 2 in the morning. I just don't want to do it. I don't want to get yanked away on a Sunday afternoon. I'm doing something to drive an hour to take somebody to a meeting. People do it, and it's incredibly helpful to somebody else, and you always feel better doing it, even when you don't want to. I'm Matt.
Hey, I'm Steve.
Hey, I'm John.
This is the Sober Friends Podcast. We're here for the sober curious, the new guy, and the old timer. We're here to talk about the stuff anyone looking to live alcohol-free has to face day to day, and how we overcame those struggles. We speak for no 12-step group, but we do try to remain anonymous. You're not alone. This is the Sober Friends Podcast. We have a listener request, Steve, from Mitzi Y. Now, I like Mitzi, and I talk to Mitzi often. Mitzi also, I would consider a producer because Mitzi has gone to buymeacoffee.com/soberfriendspod and committed to buying us a coffee every month on recurring. So somebody who's going to go do that, well, anybody's going to get my attention, but this is somebody who the podcast is important. And in jest said, hey, Bill didn't allow Lois to write to wives. Are you going to be the same thing with your podcast? Why don't you have a regular female on the show? Ooh. And I said, yeah, that's great. I just don't know anyone right now who wants to do this on a regular basis. But if there's a woman we can get as a regular co-host, I would love to do that, to have another voice.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Ladies, if you're out there listening, reach out.
I don't know if we know anybody locally who would want to do it.
Yeah.
I'm just never around meetings where there's a lot of women. Regular friggin' sausage fest at some of these meetings. But I'm open to that. But I'm also open to the right people. You know, we can rotate some people. I've got some guests lined up.
Okay, good.
As well. I don't know if these are people who would be willing to do this regularly, but they're good guests. Some people I found on TikTok, and they have fascinating stories. So that's a good thing. But I agree. I'm like, are you angry? Because I was in a place last night of just emotionally vulnerable. And she's like, no, I'm just kind of kidding with you. I'm like, all right. It's a good idea. I can't just pull the trigger on this right away.
Right.
But it's a good idea. So Mitzi, you have a good idea.
It's a great idea. I'd love to get somebody on here. Listen, one of the things I've been saying, we've talked about it here, is that it seems to me that after COVID, at least the meetings I went to, women just sort of disappeared from it. Like, we talk about it all the time with our Monday meeting. They've rebounded a little bit, but they're just not a strong presence from women. I have found women at my noon meeting. I've talked about that. It's a new meeting for me. It meets during the day, obviously noon on Wednesdays, and there's a strong presence of women, mostly older, because it's a noon daytime meeting, so it's a lot of older, retired people, but very strong sobriety. I love the meeting, and one of the reasons why I love it is the fact that I go there, and many times half of the meeting is women. And there's another one at noon. They say a lot of them go to on Mondays. I do some volunteer work, and I can't go to a noon meeting on Mondays, so I don't go to that one. But anyway, they're out there. But I agree with us. It seems to be a little bit tougher to find. Mm-hmm. But it might be something that we could work on. Yeah.
So throwing it out there. If you want to, you know how to get a hold of me. Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky. It's all at Sober Friends Pod. Matt at Sober Friends Pod. I'm here. Let's chat. Let's get some voices on. I did want to talk about the newcomer in AA, or just being around somebody who's new. I drove somebody who's pretty new to our Joe and Charlie. I'll be doing that for double digits worth of weeks. So I'm around somebody who has less than 6 months of sobriety, but even less than 6 months is green, 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 green. And I'm just not used to being exposed to that. You forget this.
Yeah.
And he was very chatty, had a lot to say, which was good because I wasn't in the mood to talk. And so when other people are chatty, you're taking the pressure off of me. Great. I'll listen and help you out. But it is a different experience being around somebody you don't really know well, who's really new. And we've been around a bunch of new people. There's another person who has almost the same sobriety date who's going to our Joe and Charlie. And there was a woman who showed up who got a 24-hour chip. I don't think she has 24 hours, but she got a 24-hour chip. If she does have more than 24 hours, she has days.
Right.
And she was as raw could be.
Yep.
And with a law school shirt on. So don't think that the disease discriminates.
No, it is nice to be around new people. I like it. I like it because it helps me remember what it was like for me, right? I mean, once you start putting years in between that that time frame, it sort of becomes a little bit fuzzy and you don't remember as much. But it is nice, and that's one of the things I like about our Monday meeting, which is what we're talking about, where we have like now 4 people with months of sobriety, or like I said, this one who came in probably days.
Yeah, there's another guy in the corner I wasn't even thinking about.
Yeah,
he's new.
Right, that's what I'm saying. So there's when they're all there's 4 fairly new people, and that really makes for a nice meeting. And it gives you the opportunity, it gives me an opportunity, I know for me, is to go up and talk to these people. I just happen, I like to talk to people. And when new people come in, I'll talk to them, right? Especially guys, right? We do try to keep men to men and women to women.
There was another woman there who's got good sobriety.
Yeah.
And she was talking to the woman, and I'm like, I'm just going to pass on this one. I would have liked to, but I'm like,
Yep.
You know what? I'm just going to pass.
No, right.
I'll let a woman.
There were 2 women there, right, who have decent sobriety, and they both talked to the newcomer, the new female, and that was great. And I saw that too, and I'm like, okay, good. They have that covered. Good for them. And that's the way it should be. So, and as a matter of fact, she was the new person was invited out with a group of women who go to dinner every Wednesday night. So that should have happened last night. Matter of fact, I should reach out. Maybe after this, I'll reach out to our friend Lori to see if she made it and showed up. But yeah, working, just being around newcomers, not even so much working with them. Working with them is a whole nother thing. It's always good to work with a newcomer or somebody who needs help. But just being around them, like you said, riding in the car, going to sit with them for 2 hours at a Joe and Charlie, which is a very different dynamic than a meeting, right? You go to Joe and Charlie, at least the way we do it around here, it's a small, intimate thing at somebody's house. It's usually all men. We can talk about whatever we want to talk about. And I think it just makes it for a more, just an easier place for you to be yourself. For most people, not everybody feels that way. But I think once you get there and you get comfortable with the people, then you start to realize, oh yeah, I could share some things here that maybe I don't want to put out in a big open meeting. So it's nice to have that with the new people. One of the reasons why we do Joe and Charlie's is for that, right? Our friend Dave Brown always did Joe and Charlie's and always tried to get new people to go to that. I was one of those new people that he got to go. I wasn't months sober. Mm-hmm. I was probably 18 months sober the first time I did it with him. But I was still fairly new to the program.
Joe and Charlie's are really great because you're going to get Big Book for Dummies. That's what I explain on the ride home, that a lot of what this is the Big Book for Dummies. And I explained a little bit I've done a little work. You have to filter through Joe and Charlie a little bit because it's their interpretation. And if you dig in, some of the stuff is not 100% accurate. It always, this is a little thing, but it always bothers the hell out of me when they talk about Columbus and Columbus proving that the ocean, that the world wasn't flat. Columbus knew damn well that the earth was round.
Yeah.
I hate when they say that because it's not true.
Yeah.
Columbus just had an issue where he didn't factor in another landmass being between him and India. Little things like that bother me, but I talked to the newcomer about there are things that Bill tells that he was not attempting to make a factually accurate history. That stuff with Ebby's story, that there was more to Ebby's story than he talks about, and it's very different. The spirit of the story is correct. And what Bill was looking to do was get people sober, and he was concerned about his own ego. He thought his own ego would get in the way because he knew he was an egomaniac. If you read Bill's story, he's an egomaniac like a lot of us are. He was more like, if I spread the credit to other people, it will knock me down. And in doing so, he fabricated a little bit of history. It doesn't change the message of how to get sober, but you have to take some of that stuff into account. So it gave me an opportunity to tell some of those stories. Like it doesn't change. It does help you understand the big book. But Bill wasn't a historian.
No.
What helps me with this is nearing 11 years sober, there's a lot I take for granted and a lot I've forgotten.
Mm-hmm.
That a drink for me is not something that really crosses my mind. And if it does, it's very fleeting. But with a new person, all bets are off. That this guy he's doing well now, but we talked a lot about how he has struggled with some stuff. And he told me about his emotions being up and down and all over the place. And that gives me an opportunity to say somebody new of, it's really okay that your emotions are all over the place. It's post-acute withdrawal syndrome. You're feeling for the first time. And this is not easy. And this may go on for weeks or months. And you need to be prepared for that. It will gradually go away. But it's okay for you to be saying, wow, this is hard and jarring. It is.
Yeah, it's okay to say this sucks, right? It is. One of the guys who I know now from my Wednesday meeting, he says it, and I've probably said it on this podcast before. I never remember exactly what I say. But he said that early on he would go to a meeting and there was an old-timer who would say, you don't have to drink today if you don't want to. And you also don't have to drink today even if you want to. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a great message, right? And that's the message that I try to tell newcomers. So it's like, you don't have to drink even if you want to, right? It's easy, you don't have to drink if you don't want to. Like, that's what we talk about. Like, we don't have this pull anymore, the two of us, of pulling us to think that we should be drinking. But man, 5 months, like I said, I don't remember exactly 5 months. I don't remember, or 6 months. Like, I don't remember 6 months into my newfound sobriety. I do remember that for me, I've talked about it here, the first 3 years of my newfound sobriety were difficult. I mean, there was a lot of emotions happening. Same thing. I was feeling stuff. I had done the steps. I had come to some hard realities about myself that weren't pretty to look at. There was a lot of remorse. There was a lot of stuff. I had a lot of amends to make. I had started them. I was working through my amends. It was hard at times. It was hard within my home, within my marriage. All those things were difficult. And I've told everybody I've ever worked with since, one of the things that saved me is even during those difficult times, I never picked up a drink. Right? I never picked up a drink. Because had I picked up a drink, I would have been back from square one. Right? I would have had to start all over again. And that doesn't mean that I didn't have some really, really, really shitty days. Because I did. But I developed a strategy early on. And again, I love telling new people this because, one of the new guys who are going through our Joe and Charlie, I'm doing some work with, and I tell him, I developed a strategy early on that when I was in a really, really bad place, I went to a meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Like I would storm out of my house, like pissed off, resentful, but I was always like, I wasn't like, I didn't know what I was doing. Like I was going to a meeting. And one of the things I always did was early on, I've talked about it here again, a meeting every night that I knew I could go to, that I knew I would probably know some people there,
mm-hmm.
and I'd be comfortable enough to raise my hand and share whatever shit was going on in my head. I had a meeting every night that I could do that at. So if I was having a bad day, those days, right, I was working all day. So I was, at least Monday through Friday I was working, and my meetings were at night. And if I needed a meeting, that's what I did. I would storm out of the house, or sometimes just leave the house, and I would go to a meeting. And that saved me many, many, many times. So it's nice to be able to have that time and share that with newcomers. Again, everybody, I'm a firm believer that everybody's got to find their own path to sobriety. Mm-hmm. They, if that works for them, great. If that doesn't work for them, that's fine. Find something else. Find whatever it is you're going to be able to do to keep you from picking up that first drink.
It helps me being around new people.
Yeah.
Because when you're around somebody new and needy, and I say needy in a positive way, when they're needy, I can be of help. And it makes me feel better that new people are pretty grateful for the most part. If they want to get sober, and somebody takes an interest in helping them, they're generally pretty grateful for it. And it's a really good feeling. And it gives me an opportunity to extend the hand. And a lot of this stuff I had a conversation around, you need to, and he gave you credit for this, that he said, Steve told me it's an honor when somebody calls me for help. And that's always been my thought process too, that when you ask me for help, you make me feel better. When you don't call me, you just deprive me an opportunity to feel better.
Right.
And so, yes, there may be some times that you got to call at 1 a.m. And I don't want to talk to anybody at 1 a.m. I really want to stay asleep. But I also understand because somebody did those things for me.
Right.
And have a contact list, and you may get around somebody who doesn't pick up or doesn't want to talk to you, but you won't get a lot of people, and people with good sobriety will do that because somebody did that for them. That's the thing is, I'm bothering somebody. The people who have good recovery, who you see at meetings and they have good recovery and you hear good things from, are going to pick up the phone if they can, because they are walking the walk. Generally, that's the case. That's the best. There are things that maybe not so great that you see in a 12-step group. The best part of the 12 steps are the people who extend the hand and help others, even when it's not in their interest and it's painful to them. Painful being, I don't want to talk to somebody at 1 or 2 in the morning. I just don't want to do it. I don't want to get yanked away on a Sunday afternoon. I'm doing something to drive an hour to take somebody to a meeting. People do it, and it's incredibly helpful to somebody else, and you always feel better doing it, even when you don't want to.
Yeah, no question about it. It's part of what makes this program special is it calls us to action. And again, it doesn't mean we have to do this every time somebody calls us, right? I don't want anybody to think that every time somebody calls us, we're going to get up out of our seat and we're going to run out and try to save that person. That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is that when my phone rings, I talk to many people regularly. And those people who I know are really sober, like, my phone rings, and if I can't pick it up, like, I know they're not calling me. I know most likely they're not calling me in crisis, right? Mm-hmm. They're just calling me because that's what we do. We call, check in on each other. Hey, how you doing? Just calling to say hello, whatever it might be. But If I get a call from somebody who usually doesn't call me, and they're on my phone, I mean, that's the only one I'm going to pick up anyway. I pick it up. It happened to me the other night. I was in the middle of making...
It happened to me Sunday.
Right. I was in the middle of making a big chili, and one of the guys, he's in my thing, I know him quite well, called me. I'm like, he's like, hey, I catch you a bad time? I'm like, no, I'm just making a big pot of chili. And he goes, yeah, I'm just trying to get better. Pick it up. And it wasn't a crisis. He was like, just trying to get better, picking up the phone, call somebody. And I talked to him for, I don't know, a good 15 minutes, you know. And he was heading out to a speaking engagement. He doesn't do a lot of that. He's one of these quiet guys. He shows up at my Friday night meeting a lot. Never raises his hand. Never shares. I know him from other places too. I've been around him a lot. And he's like, I'm trying to break out of that. And he goes, and this was him. This was him trying to break out of that, giving me a phone call. So, but my point was, like, this is not somebody who calls me regularly. So I am picking that up. And it's one of those things, I talk about it often, like my wife will sometimes get upset with me because we'll be sitting down with dinner. And if my phone rings, I'll have to say, excuse me, I have to take this call. And, you know, I'll take it. And if somebody, you know, just calling to say hello, like, hey, I'm having dinner. Can I call you back? And I'll do it. If I need to talk to that person for 15 or 20 minutes and it ruins my dinner, so be it. And as much as my wife doesn't like it, she understands it. You know, she gets the fact that I'm trying to do that to help someone else.
Yeah. And also selfishly, it helps you.
It does.
When you do those things, you feel better. The better you feel, the less likely you are to drink. And it is a reminder of like, whoa, this is what it was like. I've forgotten. Because the brain wants to do that. Let's put the pain away. And you hear some of this stuff and like, wow, this is a reminder not to go back out because I don't want to have to go through this again.
Yeah.
It's easier to maintain. That one of the conversations I had was, you know, nothing ever bad has happened because I decided not to drink. You know, I'm around people who are drinking and stuff, and I didn't get into trouble because they drank and I didn't. It's always worth thinking about that too. It gives an opportunity that you also see where step work is so vital. When you hear somebody new talking about a resentment, or I feel really guilty because of the way I treated this family member. And you realize, ding, 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 this is why you have step work. Yeah. There's a path that you feel bad about how you treated somebody. There's a recipe for that. That's going to help you get through it so that you're not holding on to that, so that you can find a way to make that situation right. And you don't have to rush at it today. As a matter of fact, do not rush at it today, because there's also running through it too fast and screwing things up worse. So you don't want to wait forever, but you also don't want to do it before you're ready, and you don't want to do it when you haven't thought it through without a plan, because that's combustible.
Yeah, that's always a tricky part. I'm facing that right now with somebody, right? One of the guys, he's going to our Joe and Charlie, and then we're going through the steps, and you know, he's working on his fourth steps, and he's anxious to do a fifth step. And I was talking to our buddy John, and he's like, you know, you should really have him hold off until we go through Joe and Charlie and get through that fourth step. And I agree, like that's a good time to do it. But as we both know, that takes a long time to get through that, right?
Yep.
It takes, out of 16 weeks, it probably takes 10 weeks to get through that.
Yep.
So I'm like, do I hold this guy up for 10 weeks while I'm trying to wait for that? I don't know, because he was over this past week, and he's like, I could tell he's anxious to talk about some of the stuff that he's finally written down. So I'm going to have to figure that out myself.
I think you can go over notes.
Right.
What do you got so far? Walk me through a little bit of what you're thinking.
Exactly. And I also told him, like, listen, this is not, it's not a one-shot deal, right? Mm-hmm. The whole point is we can also go through this stuff, and then maybe you go through Joe and Charlie and you go, oh, wow, I should have done that differently. Let me go back and redo it, right? You can go back and redo it right then and there. So I'm not sure exactly how that's going to play out. But we did a little bit of that. We talked about some of the stuff that he felt like he really needed to talk about this past week, and that's where I got that sense. I'm like, all right, I may need to do this fifth step with him, mm-hmm. because just he needs to keep moving on it. He's got some things he needs to talk about it. I do steps differently now. Like I've told him, is usually the way I do it is if we're going to do a fifth step, it takes as long as it takes, but we do a fifth step and then we take a break and we come back and do 6 and 7, which is the way it's written out in the big book. Mm-hmm. And I always tell him, you come to my house doing step 5 and you leave my house doing step 8, so, that moves it along fairly quickly. But, and like I said, I don't know. To me, it always makes me feel better. It just makes me feel better to talk to. I don't need to sponsor a newcomer. I don't need to be that, but it does make me feel better to be part of that recovery for a newcomer, right? Like the guy the young guy we were talking about who you picked up. Like mm-hmm. I feel great because I've invited him to do certain things. He's been one of the guys. We have a commitment on Friday night where we go to a local detox, not even a rehab, a detox. These people are in there for a maximum of 5 days detoxing, and we take a meeting to that detox once a month. And these two guys, they love going to this. They were, first time we went, they were like 3 months sober. It was one of the best meetings. I've taken a meeting to that facility several times. And I brought 2 guys in there who had literally just gone through detox. Mm-hmm. And it was a great meeting. They were able to relate to everybody who was in that situation. And they both have said, we'll do this every month if you want. We'll take this commitment. And it's nice to see that. So, and that's the thing we're talking about, right? It's nice to see that enthusiasm because this commitment comes up at my Friday night meeting all the time. And people look like, okay, we got that regular commitment. Who's going to take it this month? And people aren't jumping over it. A lot of times, I'll take it every month. And I'm like, I don't want to take it because I want to give somebody else an opportunity to do it. But it's just interesting. People don't feel that same way. And it's, and I love it. I'm like, these guys, these guys, they said they'll do it all the time with me. But, as a side note, I've told my wife now that we're doing Joe and Charlie, it puts me out another night. I'm like, okay, I'm not going to take any speaking commitments until that's over with. Yep. Because last couple of weeks, I had that commitment this month, and for a couple of weeks, I was out every single night of the week doing something, and that's a bit much. I need to be home at least a couple of nights a week.
It would be a lot for me. I would be wiped out.
Yeah.
I'm also subject to inertia that I don't want to leave my house after a certain time.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's just I need a break. I just don't want to be go.
I agree.
I want to be in bed at a normal time if I can. I want to get up in the morning and work out, and then I work. And sometimes I just want to sit and watch TV.
I get it. I get it.
Wrong.
It happens to me all the time. And that's one thing, again, the nice thing about newcomers, the nice thing about working with people, it forces you to do some stuff. We talked about it. You end up doing some stuff you don't want to do.
Yes.
And it forces you out. And, it's a lot of times I get up and I don't want to go out. I don't want to go out, but I take commitments. I do it. Listen, it makes my life better. Right? I'm doing coffee at my Friday night meeting, right? And I need to leave my house at 6:15. I don't get home until probably 9:15. Make coffee for the guys. And it just, I'm there alone. I make coffee, I set up, and then, I do the meeting. It just makes me feel better. I feel like I'm pitching in. And for me, it just helps keep me sober, and it's what I pass on to the new guys. I pass on taking commitments, mm-hmm. and I'll tell you, that's why I love these 2 guys that we're talking. 2 of the guys we're talking about. They both seem to be all in on taking commitments.
Yep.
They've cheered. One of them has cheered our Monday night meeting. So a lot of stuff going on, a lot of good stuff going on.
Mm-hmm. Really good stuff. And I hope that you can relate to all of this. You might very likely be newly sober. Mm-hmm. A lot of people who find sober podcasts, they are newly sober. That's how I found sober podcasts. You could be making that decision right now. Do I have a problem? Do I need to stop? Or you could be some crusty old timer who's been sober a long time, and you're breaking the stereotypes that you don't need a pamphlet. You can listen to a podcast, because there are those people out there. And then I've encountered some crusty bastards on social media who said they'd never listen to a sober podcast. And I just want to go into blue sky in those times. And I just want to strangle them. How dare you? How dare you? I'm going to take that pamphlet and whack you on your ass. That's what I have to say.
Lots of people out there listening to sober podcasts right now. Lots of people.
Yep.
And you'd be surprised to, like I said, one of the guys from, and he's an older gentleman too, from my Wednesday night, when my Wednesday noon meeting, has become a regular listener of ours.
Great.
And matter of fact, he just not yesterday, but the week before, was heading up to the library to pick up Writing the Big Book, because he had heard the interview, right? That's where he had heard the interview. And he's like, I'm going to go pick it up. I heard it on Steve's podcast. He calls it Steve's podcast. And I'm going to have to ask him if he's gotten into it yet.
God bless you going to the library. You're not going to read that in the time frame that the library is going to give you.
Yeah, they'll let you, the library, they'll just renew it.
If you take that book and drop it on your foot, you are going to break toes.
Oh,
you are going to shatter your foot.
Yeah.
That is some dense reading.
I actually was thinking, as a side note, I have a book right now, which I'll go and read after this. But I was thinking I may not get another book out of the library. I may reread that. It's been a couple of years since I read that. I only read through it once. It is one of those books that you could go through it again, and maybe go through it slower, make notes like I do the big book, that kind of stuff.
I went back and took notes.
Yeah. And just really go through it with a fine-tooth comb and do it, yeah, because it's worth it.
Yep. All right, with that, you know what to do. I have the list of things I want you to do for the podcast, and I'm not going to repeat them because I already know you know what to do. I'm going to guilt you into doing that. But until then, we'll see everybody next week. Bye, everybody.
See ya.